Hi, everyone. Welcome to Rambling About AI, episode 9, and we'll just get straight to it. We're going to talk about models. Models. Philip, go.
Models. So I think one thing that we've been really struggling with a lot lately is as the landscape has evolved, is they've continued to bring out models that have gotten better and better. As we finally reached the point where we're not even really going to be able to have access to the best models. And I think that a lot of the process of developing on these things and sort of putting these applications out there has been on that auspices that the models are getting better and better and better. And even when you looked at some of the early advice that they would give to entrepreneurs, and they'd say, build for the frontier, like build for the capability that's just past where the models are. And therefore, like by the time the models caught up, you would sort of be there. You'd have a business to work off of. But that was kind of premised on the idea that you'd have access to the next model. But when you see Mythos come out and them saying like, look, this stuff's too powerful for us, just roll it out to everybody. Well, now you've kind of shifted, like in acknowledging that that's okay, that's a way that they're going to approach the market. And now it has to be about optimization, and about how you choose models becomes more important. And it started me thinking about our process of picking, are we Cursor, or are we Claude, individually as a team working together. You know, how do you go through that process of selecting a model like that when it's so subjective in terms of your approach?
I mean, let's just take a step back a second for those that maybe are kind of new to AI and are just sort of exploring it. Like, I think a lot of people, when they come in, they just think ChatGPT. So they go, "Oh, have you used? Did you ask ChatGPT?" Or, "Hey, I've just been getting into AI recently, and I downloaded ChatGPT." And obviously, being the number one player in the space, or maybe was, I think Anthropic is probably now maybe the number one. I don't. But yeah, people always a bit like when you say you're gonna Hoover the house, vacuum the house. That brand takes the number one spot when it comes to thinking about a specific thing. So people say chat GPT, right? So I guess for the person who doesn't really understand what we're talking about when we say models, like maybe just explain what it means when you talk about different models in AI.
Yeah, so that's maybe a good clarification, because the marketing terms that people use do tend to be a little more fungible than just models. It's not ChatGPT 5.2, 5.4, right? There are specific version model snapshots that you're using. They're almost usually dated, because what they were sort of dated as a way of understanding where their knowledge boundary is. Because obviously, when they were trained, that's all the knowledge they have. So it'll be dated like, I think one of the GBT 3.5 was like, March 3rd, 0325 or something like that. And so you can tell a lot of times when you're talking to people about it and you ask them, they'll talk about some result they got and you'll say, well, what model did you use? And you can tell based on how they answer that question, really where their knowledge of it is coming from. Because if they go down to that level of the snapshot, that's a pretty good indication they really know where they're coming at a deep level. Somebody that can just say, well, it's GPT-5, you know, that's much more likely to be somebody that just kind of vibe coded it or doesn't really understand the distinction. And they don't realize that that is going to change over time. And so all the work they did to pick the model up front is going to get thrown out when there's another snapshot. It's a little
And
different.
and there's models, but there's also like different like types of models. So like I think sometimes people would know when they go to the chat GPT, there's like the little drop down and it says, well, we know on ChatGPT 5, but if you click on the drop down, you can say thinking, fast. I mean, they've changed the verbiage. Sometimes it's reasoning, thinking. Now I think they've kind of got it across most of the platforms. Anthropic, Claude, GPT is kind of more like fast. I think in Claude it was Pro. Oh, Gemini's Pro. I think it's one of the top tiers, and so like they might see that the beginner might see that when they click on a drop down and they see these different. I don't know what you want to call them, but that is essentially a different model, right? I mean, do you want to explain like what that means when they choose the different, the drop down?
Yeah, it's very much different models, different snapshots over time even. I mean, product strategy around LLMs is mostly about giving some sense of the trade-off people are making between the intelligence that comes from having more parameters, but then like the cost and the latency of having more sophisticated models that use up more memory. So you're kind of constantly making that trade-off as an individual when you're trying to implement it. But if all you're trying to do is engage with it on kind of the marketing level, than use terms that are like GPT-5
Yeah.
without really understanding.
I think what I'm talking about is like I'm getting at the reasoning, the thinking, the reasoning. So like, I think before it was kind of like you just had a model, you had GPT, let's say 4 or whatever. But then recently I think it was when the agentic stuff was coming out, the middle of the year, last year, they started adding these different reasoning models because they could think a lot more. And, not just take your question and answer it blindly, sometimes hallucinating, often hallucinating. And they'd actually go, okay, well, the user is asking me this, but I need to clarify this. And I wonder if he means this. He probably means this. So dot, 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 dot. And then they come up with the solution. And now you can actually click on thinking and it'll tell you what it's thinking about. So again, for the beginner person that's just coming into it, there are different ways you can have the question answered, and it's either fast or it can be complex, especially if it's like maybe a more complex mathematical problem you're trying to solve. And whether that's a different model or not is up for discussion, but essentially it's the same, like 5.5 ChatGPT 5.5 is just different types of reasoning within that model. Would that be correct in saying that?
Yeah, reasoning is one of those things that, like, the discovery of that, or discovery, it sort of became a part of the zeitgeist that we were talking about. The idea of reasoning was in that very early chain of thought where you could say at the end of the prompt, think step by step. And that would somehow trigger it to think for longer, to sort of framing the problem before coming to a solution. And there was the idea that, like, you can get higher quality by letting the model just kind of keep going for longer and, like, watching to see if it's done or not. Give it the opportunity to, like, continue to go, and then that would increase the quality. And it turned out that in order to do that, they would, like, artificially force it forward. They would inject tokens that it would then know that this token means that you need to keep going. And that's like a more aggressive version of just saying think step by step. But in order to do that, they have to fine tune the model to understand what those tokens mean. That when that token shows up, that's the reasoning token, and that means that it's supposed to then spend some time thinking about it. So you have to fine tune it. So saying that it's GPT-4 or GPT 5.2, GPT 5.2 Pro reasoning, whatever you want to use it, it's basically just saying it's that same model. We just tweaked it so that it understands how to think longer. But it retains most of the same underlying architecture, or certainly the same training data. It's just a matter of how long it can go.
Yeah. So we've talked about ChatGPT, and that's obviously the one that people know the most. But then now Anthropic Claude is actually they're advertising a lot now. As you see, their ads everywhere on TV, and it's crazy. Like they're obviously, I think they're taking the number one spot now. But they have obviously Claude.ai. You go to Claude.ai, you can ask a question just like you can with GPT or Gemini. When you Google, Gemini is the one that comes up. People don't really think about it. I think a lot of the time they just Google something and they say, "Oh, I Googled it," but actually it's Gemini that's producing the answer. That's another conversation. But anyway, so yeah, you have Gemini, but then Anthropic is probably, in my opinion, is probably taking the number one spot right now in terms of people's heads. Well, they have obviously lots of different models, but they have a fast, cheap model called Haiku, which I use a lot for chatbots because it's very fast, very fast. It gets back to you instantly. Really good for just basic ChatGPT stuff. Basic LLM use. And then they have another model. They have two other models which have much more advanced reasoning. They have Sonnet, and then they have Opus. Opus is like the beast when it comes to reasoning. So just again for people that are just new to this kind of thing. So those are essentially, you just said they're the same model. I don't, like I say, their underlying architecture is likely the same. But I know that when I'm doing my coding stuff, I have to like switch between, I have to actually specify Haiku, or I have to specify Sonnet, or I have to specify Opus. And each one has their own use case. I mean, like I say, I use Haiku for a lot of quick, fast stuff, and it's so much cheaper. I think it's like $0.001 or something like that to do a lot of the calls. But then Opus is so expensive, man. I've been, sometimes if I accidentally forget to change the model and I have it wired up to a chatbot or something, and I'm chatting away and I look at my usage costs and it's like, oh crap, I've been using Opus. Oh no, like $40 just disappears down the drain. But yeah, I don't know if you want to expand on that, and that's especially the Anthropic way of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, between those three, Sonnet, Haiku, Opus, there are substantial differences between those two. I think where you see it make less of a difference is between, like, 5.4 reasoning and then 5.4 chat, right? The only difference between those two models is that the reasoning one really knows how to think further, and they had to fine tune a little bit to get it. It was the same with the other. You remember they used to use dash instruct or dash chat as a suffix to the models. It's a similar thing. The same underlying base model. It's just been fine tuned for a particular interaction pattern.
Do you still use GPT-4 Mini? Because I know you used that in a project fairly recently. Would you say that that still has a place, GPT-4 Mini?
I still use it as my like, I got to put a model in there and I needed to come back with an answer, but I needed to go fast and cheap and not think about it. And Fluoro Mini is still pretty good. But people are using 5 nano now, like the nano wasn't even a class until 5. So, um, you need that sort of go to basic. I got to put something in this field,
Yeah, and
model.
what we'll probably get back. We'll probably talk about this more in detail later. Maybe you have a project right now that how many LLMs are you referencing in your new project?
Yeah, I mean, over 100 now, and the growth is how many can you find, really? I mean, I think the differences between them, have been, like, woefully unexplored at this point because their really emphasis has been that whatever deficiency you could find in a model, it was just a matter of waiting, and so when you had that expectation, so, like inflation, if your money's getting more valuable, then you just wait. You don't really spend it. But if it's getting less value, then you want to invest it. And so it's about, getting the drive to really make that to you.
Yeah, one of the things Philip and I have definitely been talking about a lot this week is just kind of like playing the LLMs off each other. So again, to a beginner, they just think, "Oh, ChatGPT, I want to ask a question." Well, it's worth asking the same question to lots of different LLMs and seeing how they respond to that question. And I know there's some YouTube shorts and memes and videos going out there right now where they kind of like they play them off each other and it's kind of funny. Some of them, it's like the car wash. Like uh, should I drive to the car wash or should I walk to the car wash? It's 100 feet away, and then the LLMs have been saying, well, you should walk to the car wash. And now that that's been solved with the latest version of ChatGPT 5.5, it says, duh. I mean, you drive, you're getting your car washed, right? But yeah, playing them off each other is a good thing to do. So there are even tools you can use. Is it Perplexity? But there's ones you can use that will ask them all and give you sort of a fair assessment on which ones.
Yeah, it's a common pattern people reach for. I built something like that. You see it all the time. I think the challenge comes more in the scale part of the question because you can solve that by just signing up for Open Router and you get a couple of hundred models kind of set. But there's still kind of an underlying baseline assumption that you're limited to the ones that they're looking at. And I think there's probably a lot of really interesting stuff happening at the long tail, but it's really hard to know what that is if there isn't really been like an exploration of it. And then the closest that you see is companies that specialize in it, but they'll always try to cut it off at some level of, well, diminishing returns, kind of thing. But when you get into, okay, this model is, 5.3 with reasoning, this model is 5.4, but I put let's think step by step at the end. Which one of those is going to be better? Right? Functionally, they're the same thing, but one is an older model with fine tuning and the other one is a newer model with reference. So if you're just waiting on the models to get better, you don't ask stupid questions like that. You just go, what's the best model I have and will it do the job or not? And our conversation's over. The bigger question is going to be once it can do it, now it's going to be about, okay, what's the smallest model that can do the job? What's the cheapest model that can do that? What's the fastest model that can do the job? There's been a lot less, I think, there. And I don't think the AI company is going to help us with that because they're not really particularly incentive to optimize your spend on AI right now, right? Trying to get you to spend more. There's going to be a little bit of time.
And that's actually just worth pointing out that whenever someone sees like something on the internet, like, man, I just got my AI agent to like create a shop for me, and now it's making $100,000 a month.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, the stuff that I see online, I'm just like on X and whatever, it's just insane. But anyway, if you see something like that, where someone's claiming that the AI agent has done all this amazing, cool stuff, there's a huge, significant cost to that. And all these experiments that are coming out of the Bay Area right now that you see coming out, they have the money to invest in this stuff, but these things are expensive, and people never really talk about that. Like I say, I mean, Opus, I was using it heavily, and like last month, and I have an auto bill my card, whatever, top ups my card automatically. And I saw an invoice go out for $45 at the beginning of the month. Like, okay, that's fine. And then I think on the 15th, it auto billed again. 45 bucks came out. And I was like, oh crap, oh my gosh. And I looked at my usage and I realized I've been using Opus a lot, kind of a bit lazily. And yeah, it was $45 in like 2 weeks of using this thing. And I wasn't doing anything crazy, but it was just like, man, I mean, that's basically like $100. Just my usage. You imagine like these people that are building these AI agents that are doing really cool stuff. I mean, they're probably using something like Opus. They're probably doing a lot of reasoning and thinking. and they're probably using up a ton of the world's resources too, which no one,
Resource,
again, no one really talks about.
yeah.
Was it that meme I saw the other day? Someone was like, uh, there was like a meme of someone like using this massive like flamethrower to light a cigar, this huge cigar, and
Yeah.
the caption was Opus, spending 5 million tokens just to change a variable.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, yeah, I think you see those stories hit because they really play to that narrative that, like, spending tokens is somehow a badge of honor
Mm.
instead
You
of like
actually do get a
a
badge.
symptom of some underlying problem.
You used to get they used to send like little badges out, little plaques and things to people that have spent loads of money in tokens. I don't think they do that anymore, but I used to see that on X. People saying, "Oh, I just got my medal for burning all these tokens."
Yeah, like, it's become the new, silver record label that's on the wall. Um,
But yeah, so again, like just again for the beginners, so we're just trying to explain like what you'd have different platforms, and also we mentioned like the top three American platforms, but there's also Chinese models too. There's like feel like Europe doesn't really get much press in this. I mean, what European models are there? Someone's probably going to comment and say, "Oh, there's
yeah.
I don't know," but there's the Chinese ones, and then there's like the American ones, and everyone is putting out their own model. Um, maybe it's the Europeans just don't really give an F. They're just
Well,
like, we're
I
too
mean, they
busy
do, but
having the siestas and
the in looking into the areas where getting feedback from multiple models is, like, really helpful, the cultural backgrounds of the training data for the models has kind of emerged as one of those spectrums. Like, they'll do it in terms of what's the typical spectrums, like collectivism versus individualism. It's kind of like an east-west divide that it's philosophically, culturally, and so they'll go to the models and they'll ask questions designed to tease that out. And models trained in Eastern cultures will reflect their version of collectivism over the individualism of the Western culture. So it comes through in the writing and it comes through in the probability of the tokens and things like that. So if your question that you're asking is one where the cultural perspective isn't like what you're measuring, but it's a way that you make sure that you're respecting all of the cultural versions of that question. And maybe that's when you do research, say like, well, okay, I need like a model pack. I need like a South American pack. I need one that was trained in Chinese by Chinese people. I need one that was trained in Europe, speaking French. It's like you kind of come up with this like these types of models become a neutral cultural panel for you that you can go back to. And then how many of those panels how do you do that distribution? There hasn't been as much. I think the reason why you haven't seen as much work there is, and we talked about pricing a couple of episodes ago. We were talking about something similar, the idea that like it's really hard to know how much we're spending here. And this kind of feels like the same thing. It's really hard to know apples to apples whether or not OpenAI's is better than Gemini's, than Google, right? You can do it if you really set down to do it, but it's not easy. And those companies aren't investing in it being easy. And we were talking about pricing. We were sort of talking about the idea that like you might call it a dark pattern. Like you are developing consumption-based software, but nowhere in that software can you see how much is being consumed. That's fucked up. Like, it's on YouTube, bleep that out. That's kind of screwed up. Now, is that a dark pattern? Not really, because it's not something they did to do it, but it's a step they could take that would benefit. They're choosing not to because it's better for them strategically. And I think that's the reason that Google does not benefit from you being able to weigh it against Anthropic. It benefits from you thinking that Google's selection of models themselves is what gives you the variation in design, but that can't be the case. It can't have the same kind of neutrality that multiple vendors can.
it's also worth pointing out there that you made a good point that a lot of they're incentivized. There's a company behind them. They're wanting their share value to go up. So whenever you hear these things like, "Oh my gosh, Anthropic just released a new model that's going to wipe out this and do this and do that," it's like there's obviously someone who's pushing that narrative is obviously incentivized by the growth of the company. So don't always believe. Always weigh up what you hear when it comes to these things. I was going to ask I was going to bring something up. We talked a bit about dating, like the dating of the models. Um, I've often thought about this, like when I've used like Opus 4.7, I talk about Claude Code, or I might talk about OpenClaw, right, which is one of the the things that came out with the autonomous that you put on your computer. But like if I mention that, it's like, oh yeah, it obviously knows about Claude Code. It's like, oh, you can use Claude Code for this if you're talking to Opus. But if you used a model that was like, let's say a year ago, or an old model, because it was trained on data at that point, it wouldn't know about Claude Code, right? Is that right? Is it that the training data that it has up to that point is set in time, and therefore the model you choose won't know anything new? Like it wouldn't know about OpenClaw if I start talking about OpenClaw in a model that was maybe released 6 months or a year ago. Is that fair? Is that correct?
That's correct if you're dealing with the models themselves. If you're dealing with the companies that host the models, that can vary somewhat because it essentially just means you need a search function over it before you get to the model part. But well, like when you interact with Perplexity with the API when you're using Sonar, that's a search model. The model's not searching. It's a harness that goes and searches and then provides that to the model. So I think you have a thought process there of is a task that I'm expecting it to do one that would benefit or be hindered by information having been cut off at that point in time. And if it is, then you know you need a search layer over it. If it isn't, then you sort of rely on it
Or
for
it
that.
could be that maybe these models all have some kind of generic system prompt that basically tells them, like top level.
They do. They know when they're cut off. You'll ask them and it'll say it. I think they usually put it in the prompt because it's kind of a common thing people ask. And so it'll say, oh, my knowledge cutoff is here. But remember, knowledge cutoff means that's when they stopped getting more data to train the model. Like that's kind of the end of it. But it's not to say that like it wasn't knowledge at the time. It just hadn't made its way into the search engine and the indexing and whatever they were using to like gather them all together. So there's actually a test case I want to do that doesn't ask the model when they were trained, but it tests on specific events that happened on particular days and tries to see if it knows that they're there and that it happened. And so if you ask it when it was trained, right, and then you plot a curve around that, and you go to a calendar and you look for events that happened on the exact days around it, then you can get an actual date that the model cutoff kind of stops, which I think will be a lot more interesting. It'll be interesting to see how varied that is between the two.
This is a fun little thing for any product builders out there, anyone that's experimenting with building products or, Claude Code users. I've been doing this thing where I will build out some software, and then to test it, you have your standard unit test and everything, and that just makes sure the API functions and that kind of stuff to a basic level. But then what I've been doing is I've been creating like having the AI create a sub agent for personas. So you create different personas in different let's say different countries or whatever, different age group buckets, whatever. And then you use your app with these different personas, and you test out your app, right? Usually the back end, not interface type stuff, but like usually hitting the back end with different personas. And what you can do is you can basically have the LLM look at all these personas, the test results from all these different personas who have used it, and then make an assessment. Like for example, like if you're doing a fitness route, if your app generates workouts, and then you have different personas using those workouts, you could then create another agent which will be like a personal trainer. You're a professional personal trainer, and look at these workouts that were generated, and tell me what you think. Were they good or not? And then they'll give a score rating. That's what I've been doing to test out the app with Persona. So it's kind of like very multi-layered agentic kind of testing. But when it comes to different models, what you can do is you can have different personal trainers from different models. You can say, okay, have Gemini create a personal trainer, have Claude be a personal trainer, have ChatGPT, and then you can have them all make their own assessments. And it's interesting to see how they vary. And then you could even have all those reports combined. And then you could have another agent on top of that. Look at all these reports and tell me which one you think is the best. And it's
Yeah,
subjective,
yeah, yeah.
but it's kind of a fun way of like we said this week. You said there's like an infinite kind of like a spiral that it goes down. You remember we were talking about that?
Yeah, it's a recursion. Like every prompt that you could ask an LLM, you can hypothetically take the same prompt and ask 5 LLMs, collect the answers together, and then ask an LLM to summarize it. Well, when you ask the LLM to summarize it, you could also ask 5 LLMs to summarize it and pick which summary you like. So you can just keep going forever. But that basic underlying premise, and you gave me a really interesting idea here around the idea of personas, because it's one thing to talk about models having different perspectives and opinions based on their training data, but that probably also means that they have a varying degree of ability to mimic a particular persona. And you might go and you say like, well, look, if your persona is a UI UX designer, then you should use Gemini when you do that,
Well,
or
there's Grok
Gemini
too,
Pro 5 or
and there's
Grok, or
Grok.
whatever, because you'd say that's the best one if you're trying to personify that. And you might be able to you might be able to turn that into like a little bit of a service, because someone could come and say, hey, this is the persona. What's the best model for me to use to mimic this? And you sort of developed a way to test that out. Oh, that'd be a cool idea. But I think the underlying point, right, that different models bring different perspectives into a conversation that's being had. And right now, it's all designed to bring models developed by the same company, as these are the ways that you introduce different perspectives. You've got the really learned, sort of slow thinking Opus. You've got the tactical executing, get it done Sonnet. And then you've got the like kid who's just really eager and goes really fast, but like isn't that good Haiku, right? So they take on like those personas, because from a marketing standpoint, that's product positioning. But it'd be an interesting question to ask if that ends up manifesting personas that they can take on too, right? Is Haiku better at impersonating eager junior engineers?
I think I sent you this video, but I watched this clip last night, and it was basically about this guy who was using ChatGPT, and he was asking some kind of mathematical question. He was checking ChatGPT with this mathematical question, and GPT was like, they were having this back and forth, and then as they were having this back and forth, this mathematician guy that was using it was like, well, hang on, what it was supposed proposed this idea. And then basically GPT was like, wow, this is fundamentally new. This has never been explored before. And then they sent it back to the guys like, really? Well, hang on. And they ended up creating, he said, GPT was like, this essentially is a new mathematical framework you've just designed here that doesn't exist. And the guy was like, they were back and forth. He said, I think they went spent days going this back and forth. And the guy went like, he ended up getting this kind of like he got really obsessed, and ended up like freaking out because it was, he was like, then apparently the GPT was saying things like, you need to contact NSA and you need to like, this is groundbreaking. What you've created here could essentially break into computers and this guy was like freaking out. He's like, do I need to call the government, governmental agencies about this? And it went crazy apparently. And then it got to the point where I think he was just so obsessed with it. It was like affecting his mental health. And then, and then so I think someone said, well, if you check it with Gemini, and then he checked his whole theory and put it all together into Gemini. And Gemini said, you're full of shit. And the guy was like, oh my gosh, so it's that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I mean, all this hallucination is one thing, but it's just a crazy making the point that you should always use other LLMs to check. And I do that a lot. Like I'll have other LLMs check what I'm doing and making sure. Like you could ask, let's say you could ask Codex, which is OpenAI's coding tool. You could say, build me a secure app. Make sure it's really secure. And it goes, I've checked it for this, I've checked it for that. Yep, it's really secure. Using JWT. Da, da, da. It's very very secure. And you go, cool. And then you have it write report, and then you send that report to another LLM, and then the other LLM will say, no, you've missed this, you've missed that. This has actually not been done properly. You have So that's again a good use case of the back and forth between the different models, so you don't miss anything. And I
Yeah.
guess if you have that same security report audited by like let's say 5, 6, 7, 8 different LLMs, theoretically, you should have a pretty good security audit, right? Wouldn't you say? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, theoretically, and that's where like the theory of one perspective is not enough. You need to bring in multiple perspectives in order to make sure that what you're moving forward with works for those perspectives, right? But there's a precursor to that, which is you have to know that the perspectives are in fact different in order to rely on their difference as being like a thing of value, right? And so if I was going to build something and design like the best landing page imagine, right? It wouldn't be uh like ask Opus if it's the best landing page ever, right? And it wouldn't just be ask Opus and Sonnet and Haiku. I would have done the work ahead of time to say Haiku really likes this kind of website, Sonnet really likes this kind of website, and Opus really likes this kind of website, and they all like very different kinds of websites. And so if they all like my website, now that's meaningful, right? But if it turned out that they all like the same kind of website, and I just happened to create that same kind of website, then I didn't actually introduce any new perspectives by using those other models. So the question is, how do you know? How do you know when you introduce a model whether you are actually introducing another perspective, or if you're just reinforcing a perspective that was
I think
already
it's two. That's two different things. Though. I think we're talking about taste, and we're talking about like sort of this binary idea of it being right or wrong.
perception? Yeah, perception quality. You're right. You're right. I mean, it's definitely harder to use the subjective version of it, um, but they definitely have preferences. They love Tailwind. Chances are DeepSeek probably doesn't love Tailwind because the training data would have been a lot more about what the Chinese were using at the time, and it just doesn't line up, right?
Tailwind is a CSS framework. So basically, whenever you look at a website, most websites are built with Tailwind.
Yeah, most of them will tell it. So, good example. One of my favorite questions that I haven't run it down yet, but is asking what their favorite color is. Small, right? Good example. What's your favorite color? They almost all say blue
Purple.
because they love Tailwind because on
Yeah,
Facebook,
purple
whatever.
gradients.
But to the point of the anecdote, if I was trying to pick whether a color was a good fit for a particular design that I was looking for, right? I would very much want to know what their model's favorite color is, because if all the model's favorite color is blue, and I say, "Is blue a good fit for this thing?" They're all gonna say, "Yes," but not because it's actually a good fit for the thing, because their favorite color is blue. So what I wanna do is I wanna know I have a blue model, I wanna know I have a purple model, I wanna know I have a red model, I have a yellow model, and I don't care why, that doesn't matter, right? I just need to know that they were different so that if I ask, "Is blue a good fit for this?" and they all say yes, I know that it's a good fit, and not just that they like it.
So when Opus 4.7 came out, I think they were like going back against, they were like angry about all the people that saying like, oh, I'm sick and tired of purple gradients. So it's almost like when 4.7 came out, they were pushing back against all of that. And they were like, screw it. We're going to
Wildly a
use
different
orange. We're going to use bright, horrible, garish orange in all the apps we create now. And now you can see it. So it's like you see these like bright oranges and we're going to put italics in for every subheading. And you're like, damn it, I've built 3 apps now and they all have that.
It would be amazing to me if they do not naturally gravitate towards designs that reflects the design schematics of their training company. Like Anthropics, Claudes, the Opuses, the Sonnets, they all kind of start to like that burnt orange, because that's Anthropic's orange. And so a lot of the stuff they're going to get trained on is going to have that orange. And a lot of stuff that their internal people build to show it the way it's supposed to work is going to have that orange. And like, it's just going to start
I actually really like
using it.
I like whatever they did with the training data in the latest version of Opus. I like it because the last design I did was kind of like a London agency design. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So come out of Shoreditch, East London. Anyway, I was going to say also all this model stuff does apply to images and videos too. So we talked a lot about text, but when you generate an image in GPT, it's going to look very different to an image generated with Claude. In fact, Claude struggles. I don't even think Claude can natively generate images. Gemini has Nano Banana, which again, very different. And actually, a lot of all the podcast cover images for this podcast are generated using ChatGPT. If I use Gemini, it's terrible. It really doesn't do very good. I think I did one cover image with Gemini, the one with the Japanese background. That was cool. But a lot of these podcast ones are done using ChatGPT because it's almost like it has the same look and feel. And actually, I've seen that in other people's cover images too, but with the yellow kind of titles. I like that, and I just want to be consistent. So I always use ChatGPT, and I always use the same thread too in GPT, because if I start a new thread, it kind of goes randomly off. So it's just worth pointing out that too, that images and videos that are getting generated also can vary wildly based on the model and the platform.
Even where you introduce them in the conversation, and different models have different ability to kind of look past that. I mean, you'll notice a big difference between the models is if it's doing something and then you tell it, you sort of like interrupt it, either literally or just type something in. Some models will see what you wrote. They'll say, okay, they'll do that. And then they'll go back and do the previous one that they were working on before. Other models will do what you did and then they'll go, done. And you'll go, no, what? There's all that stuff that I said before. And it's totally forgotten because that's the way it was trained. It was trained more in there's one response kind of thing.
It's
That
pretty
and
cool
that
to
that's how you know.
it's pretty cool to see the evolution though, how the image generations have just improved leaps and bounds. Even a year ago, I was using a model for image generation for generating a dashboard the other day, and it was obviously using probably one of the earlier models, let's say GPT-4 or something like that, early image generation model, and with all the fabricated text. Everyone's forgotten about that now. You remember all the fabric? Sorry, not you know what I mean, like the scribble text. You don't really see that anymore now,
Yeah,
right? That was a
yeah.
big thing. It used to be so annoying. And I was generating this dashboard, and it had all this gibberish text in it. And then I used a new model. I just literally set the same prompt into GPT 5.5, and it created this beautiful dashboard. It was actually in light mode. So I was like, no, it missed that actually. I said, didn't make sure it's in dark mode in the original prompt. And then I put the paste, then I just said, no, I wanted it in dark mode. That was the second prompt. Created redid the whole image, and it looked really beautiful in dark mode. I changed the whole thing. So basically there was one iteration, and then it looked great. And that was just basically one prompt and then one iteration. And then we had this beautiful dashboard with all the text was correct. And that's where we are at now with image generation. And it's just cool to see that evolution. And I can't speak to video, but I'm sure it's the same with video.
Yeah, video just ended up being way more expensive. There's a Hacker News thing that comes out every time there's a new model of a guy that makes a pelican on a bicycle, and you can sort of see, like, the progress, and then all of a sudden, they got amazing, but when you look at it, it's like, yeah, okay, so eventually they figured out they needed to train it how to make pelicans on bicycles.
That's right.
Like every standard becomes
Will Smith and the spaghetti.
part of the training data. Yeah, Will Smith is spaghetti. Yeah, everything that becomes a metric ceases to be useful in one, so it's kind of the same thing.
So what do you think the future of models is like now? Like, do you think it's just going to be constant Opus 4.8, Opus 4.9, ChatGPT 5.6? Do you think it's just going to be constant releasing of models with new training? I mean, what are they going to what are they going to learn now? Like, what would you say? Do you think we've hit like a bit of a sort of an arc in the growth curve of model? Do you want to talk a little bit about that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so when you open a gold mine, right? When you first open it, you just go deep, like you wherever the thickest vein of the ore is, right? You follow it and you go as deep as you can, and eventually that main vein of ore starts to dry up, and so you start to, instead of just going deeper, you sort of go back and you start scraping away at the walls, right?
That's a good analogy.
Right, but there is a point in time at which that happens, and you can argue about when that would happen, but I feel like we've crossed that point. I feel like the moment a model comes out that's so good that the company putting it out says, "I'm not gonna give this to you." Now, okay, is that a marketing thing and they're blowing smoke?
You're
Maybe.
talking about
Talk about mythos,
Mythos,
right?
which is what you mentioned right
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Are they saying that to get publicity? Who knows? But who cares? But it's more about that it's okay now to say, "I've got a model that's too good to give to you," and that's a thing you can do. So once that's the thing you can do, it's gonna be done.
You just need to subscribe. It's $19.99 a
Yeah,
month.
you just need to, it's gonna be done. So you have to then think like, "All right, if it's not gonna be about the next model, right, then we gotta go back and start scraping the sides of the walls." And is a long tail of models that no one has ever touched. Hugging Face, no one has ever touched in any strict commercial sense. Hugging Face has tens of thousands of models that they've accumulated over the years. And it's like, you remember Bleak, right? Love Bleak. Primarily the way they crafted Bleak to someone's voice was with prompt engineering, right? It was like right in the prompt, context, sliders, whatever. But there was an equally valuable way to change the voice of an LLM, which is use a different LLM. And so a service that is designed to match a voice, I think will have to add the ability to look across a wide variety of models in order to get more quality, because the quality won't be there just from waiting until the next more powerful model comes out. That feels like an inevitability. I think we can argue whether we're there or not, but I think the dynamics and the forces at play are going to force it in that direction. And personally, I think we've crossed that.
My opinion is that the learning data is the learning that it's going to be doing now is much more in what's going to empower agents to make decisions about things, autonomous decisions. Like right now, an agent, I guess this is talking about AGI, right? But an agent right now, if it's sitting there, you ask it to do something, and it will do a chain of things like a task list, right? And it'll get to the point from point A to point B. It won't take as long as it needs to take. It could take days, but essentially it'll get to point B. What it doesn't do right now is sit on your phone, just sit, and then suddenly go, "I've had a great idea. I'm going to do this." I know Stu's doing this and this and this, so I know I've got a great idea. I'm gonna go ahead and build this thing. And then he's going to wake up the next morning, and I'm like, haha, I built this thing for you. And I'm going to go, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I wanted. Thank you so much. That hasn't happened yet. Arguably, it could. I think that's what Elon Musk is going on about, it being happening in the next couple of years or whatever. But it doesn't do that right now because it doesn't want to make assumptions because it doesn't know, it can't make good assumptions. Like it could go ahead and build this app for me and burn loads of tokens, cost me loads of money, and then I'd be like, "What the heck? I don't want that. I don't need that." Or my website doesn't need this, or my business doesn't need that. You just went ahead and did this thing you didn't need to do. So that's kind of a decision making thing, and it doesn't know right now what good decisions are right now. And therefore, by learning and saying, what would you like to do right now? Do you want to do A, B, and C, or D? Or I think Paul Code asks this a lot. It's like, do you want me to do A, B, and C? And that's not just because it's being kind and checking that you're okay. It's learning. It's saying, okay, he went for A. He went for the easy option. And out of million users, 600,000 went for the easy option, and 400,000 went for the other options. And it's learning and saying, okay, this is probably the best option, right?
Yeah.
So it's not really now about like which is the most common word that comes after the. It's about what's the most common decision that gets made in this situation. Would you say that's correct or fair? Or
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think you call out an interesting factor around agents because it has sort of taken over the archetypal use for AI now. That the models that are being trained now are being trained primarily to be used by agents, and you don't necessarily have to know exactly how an agent trained model would differ from a non-agent trained one to know that it does differ in some way. I feel like we don't really understand that quite as much because one thing that's come up over and over again with models is you have to be woke about it. You have to know how they were trained. You have to be like literate as to how they came to be. And knowing that in order to balance what the demand becomes then where the value is knowing where you can apply it. And if you know that it's been applied for agents and agents and agents, and you're doing something different from that, you are going to struggle because it is being steered in a direction that you are not going in. And so I think that awareness of, oh, maybe I use an older model, not because it's better, because it hasn't been so trained to be an agent. And my use case isn't agentic, even though most of them are.
of that word, agentic. Was that actually in a word? It before
Agent, well, it would have been from agency. 'Cause I was making a joke.
no agentic.
Agentic, yeah.
That was a word.
I don't think it was in the lexicon. It would have been like an automaton, right? Autonomy, agenticness. I was thinking about this the other day about the idea that like what people sell agents as is there are these things that can do things for you and can keep going. But then when we give people advice on how to use AI, we tell them to be really careful and check all of its output and, you know, own its responses as if they were your own. And so but we don't seem to realize that those messages are diametrically opposed. We're saying like the valuable thing about here is it can be agenic, but the best way to use it is to not let it be agenic because you can't trust it. And that's an interesting balance to have to play.
Yeah, we're definitely rambling, but this is a great topic for the next podcast. Is that like I believe that agent design is the next thing. I mean, focusing on just designing agents and designing thing. We talked about this in one of our podcasts, the AX designer. It's going to be all about agents. Like user interfaces aren't really going to be a thing. Like the whole having an interface. It's just going to be agents doing everything. A dashboard where you go in and click filters and you do all these things. An agent will be the dashboard. The agent will create the dashboard for you on the fly. So like, I need to check my metrics for the day. Okay, the agent's going to provide that based on what it knows about you for that particular moment in time, for that particular snapshot in your
Yeah.
life. That's the dashboard is going to create for you. It's going to be agent design, and I think that's going to be the next thing over the next
Yeah.
couple of years of focusing on agents for sure.
No, I love that. In fact, that would be a great topic for next time just to think about, or is that even the final form, right?
Mm.
Because it was chat. Now it's agentic. It was chat. Is that it? Or does it keep going further than that into more of
It's
a
gonna be
more
probes that
abstract
go into your brain, and then you don't even have to say anything, you have to type in. It's just
neural? Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I
it's like,
mean, it's
"I need,"
coming.
and it's just gonna, "I need ice cream.
It's
I
if
need ice cream."
it's if not when you'll order ice cream with thought, for sure.
Agent that gets me ice cream would be awesome. All right, that's it, everyone. If you've got any comments, please leave them, and we'd love to hear your opinions on everything. And yeah, thanks for listening. See you next time.
Stay cool.